It's Wisconsin Today. I'm Kate Archer-Kent.
And I'm Rob Farrett. The Wisconsin Insurance Commission has issued its first asset forfeiture related to fraud after the state legislature granted that agency more authority to handle fraud back in 2023.
Meanwhile, rates for home and auto insurance are surging across the country, with companies seeking an average 11% rate hike this year.
Here to talk with us about this and other issues related to insurance in Wisconsin is Nathan Hodak, Wisconsin Commissioner of Insurance. Commissioner Hodak, welcome to Wisconsin Today.
Thank you. Good morning.
We have this first forfeiture related to insurance fraud under these new rules, this new authority from the legislature. How did that process go compared to the old way of doing this kind of thing?
Well, this new authority has really given us the ability to investigate and prosecute insurance fraud in a broader way than we've been able to in the past. And it allows us to take a broader approach and really look at potential insurance fraud that's occurring across all lines of insurance with a specific focus on property and casualty, especially auto insurance, as well as workers' compensation insurance fraud.
Now, this case involved a business. Can you give us the broad outlines of what the violation was and how you caught it?
Certainly. So in this first action, we issued a forfeiture against a Milwaukee area business owner who had misrepresented his business for the purpose of essentially underpaying insurance premiums for workers' compensation. So between 2016 and 2022, he made a number of different misrepresentations to his insurer that essentially resulted in him paying about $101,000 in workers' compensation underpayments. And we got a tip that this was occurring, and our fraud attorney investigated this. We found out that this, in fact, was occurring, and we issued a forfeiture earlier this month.
In statements about this, your department has made the case that the victim of the crime isn't just, the insurance company that was being underpaid, that this, in effect, can affect all ratepayers in the state. Connect the dots for us.
Yeah, so insurance fraud is not a victimless crime. Oftentimes people think, well, it's just a little white lie. Maybe they're not honest on their insurance application, or they file a claim on a homeowner or auto insurance issue, and they think, well, it's minor. It's not that big of a deal. But the reality is, insurance fraud across the country costs an estimated $308 billion across all lines of insurance with fraud, again, across the entire country. And what that means is that families end up paying about $750 to $1,000 more per year in their insurance premiums because basically people are being dishonest in how they're filling out their insurance applications or in the claims that they're submitting.
I imagine your goal isn't we're going to do lots of prosecutions because people are doing lots of fraud, but rather that the message gets out there that you shouldn't do the fraud in the first place. So what message are you sending to, in this case, businesses on how they handle paying for that workers' compensation insurance?
We always encourage everyone to follow the law. It's important that when people fill out their insurance application, when they submit information with regard to their workers and how they classify their workers in particular, which is a big issue, that they're doing that accurately and correctly. And, I realize that people don't like to pay insurance premiums, whether you're an individual or a business owner. But, like anything else, we have to pay for the services that we receive, and everyone has to pay their fair share. And if someone is being dishonest and trying to get out of paying their fair share, what that means is somebody else is picking up that cost. So ultimately, we would hope that everyone, again, whether you're an individual or whether you're a business owner, that everyone's being honest.
Commissioner Hodak, people might be listening saying, okay, great, we've caught this fraud, but hang on, I'm an insurance customer. I pay premiums to a company for health insurance, auto, home, whatever. What if that company I've been paying money to doesn't fulfill, in my opinion, their obligations? Does your department help out in those kind of cases where an insurer isn't doing what they're obliged to do based on what their customers have been paying for?
Yes, so that is one of the things that our agency does is provide assistance to insurance consumers. If people feel like they are not being treated fairly through the claims process or through any other component of the insurance process by either their insurance company or their insurance agent, they can feel free to contact our office, and we have dedicated staff who are experts in providing assistance to people, to helping answer questions. We can act as a intermediary and contact a company or an agent to try to get information if people feel like they are not getting correct or timely information. So it's important for people to realize that our office, the Office of the Commissioner of Insurance, is here as an important resource for all insurance consumers in Wisconsin.
We're talking to State Insurance Commissioner Nathan Hodak about various issues in the insurance industry for businesses and consumers. Now, we're seeing requests for insurance rate increases in states around the country. Car, homeowner insurance rates risen 11% on average last year. This works differently from state to state. What is Wisconsin's Insurance Commission's role in premium setting?
Yes, so we for many types of insurance in Wisconsin, insurers file their rates with our office, and as long as the rates comply with laws and they are deemed to be actuarially justified, then those rates can be used in the market. And it's important to always remember that insurance rates for any type of insurance, whether it's auto insurance, homeowners insurance, health insurance, they reflect the underlying cost of the thing that's being insured. And as we look at increases, especially in like the property insurance market for homeowners insurance, a lot of those increases are being driven by more severe weather events that we're seeing. They're being driven by some of the supply chain disruptions that we continue to see still dealing with from COVID. And there are a number of other factors that have been driving up the cost of, what it costs to build a home or replace a home. And, the reality is we in Wisconsin are not alone in seeing these rate increases. This is happening across the country, especially in places like Florida, or obviously the West Coast, where you're seeing massive wildfires and other severe weather events. The reality is that those weather events and cost increases for supplies and labor ultimately get reflected in insurance costs.
Are you seeing those kind of big insurance, those big premium increases coming across the table here in Wisconsin?
No, we have been seeing increases in Wisconsin, but we do continue to have some of the lowest insurance rates for both auto and homeowners insurance coverage in the country. And, I know that's not necessarily comforting when people might be seeing their homeowners insurance going up by double digits. But again, those rate increases are the result of cost increases overall. And this is something that's happening across the country. And frankly, the rate increases in a lot of other states are significantly higher than what we've been seeing in Wisconsin.
You were recently selected to head a national committee on insurers' financial solvency, so making sure that they can meet their obligations, as you mentioned, in the face of extreme weather being part of the story. How big an issue is this, that insurance companies are going to have the money that they have on the hook for our premiums?
I mean, the positive thing is, insurance regulators take a very strong approach to making sure that insurance companies remain financially solvent. And, a part of that obviously is ensuring that adequate premium is being collected. But it's also important for insurers to be assessing the increased risk from things like the changing weather patterns and more severe weather events that we've been seeing. And, fortunately, most insurers recognize that these changes are happening, and they're making sure that they are changing their business models and their pricing and underwriting and all the other practices that go into running an insurance company to make sure that they are able to remain solvent. At the end of the day, we as insurance regulators, want to ensure that companies are there to fulfill their promise to policyholders in the future.
Your agency put out a guideline to insurers about the use of artificial intelligence, AI, presumably in the evaluation of insurance claims. What is your message to companies and how they use this emerging technology that's showing up all over the place?
Yes, so we issued an artificial intelligence bulletin, it's called. And essentially what it does is inform insurers that if you are using artificial intelligence, that the existing insurance laws and regulations that are currently on the books still apply to the use of this new technology. So yes, we all recognize that there is benefit to consumers from adoption of new technology and digitization, and that's a positive. And we don't want to impede that benefit to consumers. We don't want to stand in the way of insurers being able to adopt new technology. But as regulators, it's important that we are also communicating to companies that as they are adopting new technology, they need to be thinking about how existing laws and regulations apply to the use of that new technology.
Commissioner Hodak, just briefly, if somebody's heard something and they think they have something to communicate to your agency, reporting what they think might be an instance of insurance fraud or thinking that a claim has been denied illegally, what's the process? How do they reach out to your agency?
Yeah, the best way is go to our website, oci.wi.gov, oci.wi.gov. And you can find a number of places to submit information about insurance fraud, or going back to your question about needing assistance with issues with an insurance company or an agent. All that information is on our website, and we have people who are here who can provide assistance, can follow up on any potential fraud that people would like to report. Mm-hmm. And it's just important that people know we're here as a resource for them.
Commissioner Hodak, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
That's Nathan Hodak, Wisconsin Commissioner of Insurance, talking about a number of issues in the insurance industry.
Coming up on Wisconsin Today, we'll get the long view on book challenges and book bans at libraries in Wisconsin.
The right to ask questions about or challenge a book is as important as the right to read.
That's coming up next from WPR News. It's Wisconsin Today. I'm Kate Archer-Kent.
And I'm Rob Farrett. The American Library Association reports that last year, people and organizations attempted to ban more than 2,400 different books at libraries around the country.
Among the books that were challenged were The Bluest Eye, The Perks of Being a Wallflower, and All Boys Aren't Blue. Many of these titles were listed on partisan book banning lists that encouraged parents and community members to challenge their availability, but attempts to remove books from school libraries aren't new.
For more than 3 decades, Megan Schlesman has been helping libraries deal with book challenges through her work at the UW-Madison Cooperative Children's Book Center. Ahead of her retirement next month, we wanted to check in with her to understand what she's learned about these challenges and how libraries can work with their communities on these kind of issues. Megan, welcome to Wisconsin Today.
I'm happy to be here.
You've been doing this work related to book challenges at libraries for a good long time now. What kind of changes have you seen over the years?
I have been doing it for quite a few years. It's one dimension of the work that our library does. We do a lot of other things. But before I answer that, I want to sort of provide some grounding information.
Sure.
So it's really important to know that every library has or should have board-approved policies and procedures which help guide them through a process when somebody has concerns about materials. And then it's equally important to know that school and public libraries have a responsibility to serve their entire community, from the most visible and most vocal members of that community to the least visible and least vocal. So looking back over my career and doing this work, for most of it, it was really typical for a book concern to or a challenge to really come from a parent about a specific book that their child brought home from the public library or the school library. Sometimes it might be that the parents just weren't ready or were surprised to see their kids reading a book about a certain topic. It just created a level of concern or discomfort for them. And what they would do is contact the school or the public library, and the process outlined in that library's policies for responding to concerns would then be engaged. So that might start with having an informal conversation to see if that concern could be resolved that way, or it could move on to a formal challenge of that book. Around late 2020, early 2021, what I think of as those really terms of engagement, those rules that we follow that are local to each library, really began to change in terms of how libraries were finding out about materials concerns. In communities across the country, including here in Wisconsin, there were orchestrated efforts to raise questions about books with specific kinds of content, specifically books about gender identity and sexual identity, and books that talk about race and racism. And often the first a public or a school library would know that there was concern is the books were sometimes brought up at a board meeting, and excerpts would be read that often cast the book in the worst possible light, or they'd receive emails or requests to challenge the books, sort of be inundated by them. Instead of it being one book, it might be 5 or 10 or an even longer list.
And that reflected, it seemed like a coordinated effort on social media, some nonprofit groups saying, hey, here's a list of books you should see if they're at your library.
That's why I think of it as an orchestrated effort, is a lot of the same books were being challenged in different places or being critiqued in different places, and the same things were being shared about them. And a lot of this was coming from websites or information shared by various organizations. Again, they would put together reports on these books that would pull out quotes and material out of the context of the book as a whole.
Inherently, there's nothing necessarily wrong about a book challenge. A parent, say, raising concern about, hey, should my kid have access to these books?
Absolutely. And in fact, I think one of the things that I've often said over the course of my time doing this work is that the right to ask questions about or challenge a book is as important as the right to read. And it's as important as a responsibility of a library to provide materials that serve everyone in their community.
For this wider effort, I think the argument might be, hey, we feel like libraries have changed. There's more material on topics that many parents will be concerned about, that as a community, we're worried about kids in general having access to these books.
Right. And actually, one of the things I can tell you because of the data that's out there about diverse books in particular, and is that absolutely the number of diverse books published for children and teens has increased, particularly over the past 10 years. And so inevitably, probably when you walk into your child's school library or public library, it might look different than you remember a library looking when you were young. But when you think about that need to really build a collection that is reflecting the world kids live in and all the kinds of diversity in your community, because every community has diversity, some of it visible, some of it not visible, that's a really great thing. And then libraries don't buy everything available. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of books available to purchase every year. And they're really doing the hard work of researching those books, looking at reviews, deciding what they're going to purchase, following their library's collection development policies and procedures, including where that book goes in the collection.
It seems like one of the thorniest issues over or placing these books is going to be a family that may say, hey, because of our religious background, we don't feel comfortable with our kids, any kids having access to things related to lesbian, gay, bisexual issues, and we feel we reflect the community as a whole. Why did the library make the decision to have those books in our library? How do you start to have a calm conversation and work those issues out?
Right, and it can be really challenging because absolutely those parents or guardians have every right to decide what they want their own kids to read. And so that is, again, a fundamental element of libraries. The other fundamental element of libraries is that libraries are places of choice. So librarians are building those collections so that everybody in their community can come and have choices, because the tastes and the needs and the interest, in addition to aspects of identity, vary. Think about everybody in your household who has different tastes, let alone from family to family, from community to community members. So again, diversity isn't always visible, but it is absolutely there. And no individual can speak for their entire community. And so parents should absolutely decide what they're comfortable having their own children read and talk to them about what they're reading and ask them what they're checking out the library if they weren't right there when their child was choosing books. But it's a really different thing to say no family should have access to this book, because that puts the library in the position of, and this is what they do during a challenge, they're weighing that concern and they're looking again at the same kinds of material, reviews and other information that they looked at when they were selecting books. And they're also thinking about the needs and interests of the rest of the community.
Another situation might be a parent thinking, hey, I'm fine with this book being at the library, but it's got some material. My kids, I could think of like maybe a horror novel. I'm not necessarily ready at my age for some horror novels.
I'm with you.
How do we have that conversation? What are the options for the librarian about how to provide access for that book, but maybe not to the younger audience?
Different libraries can handle it different ways, but part of it is, again, the ultimate responsibility rests with parents. So to be talking with their kids, to be engaging with their kids about what they're checking out of the library, and to be accompanying their child when their child's still young enough and they're uncertain about those choices, because you know your kid best. Absolutely. The librarian, think of all the kids that are coming into a library. A librarian can't possibly know them all. I have talked to librarians who have said if they know a child, for example, is averse to horror, and I'm also averse to horror, they might say, that book is really scary. I just want you to know that. So if you decide you don't want to read it or don't like it, just bring it back and I'll help you find something else.
I want to flip things around. Suppose somebody wants more of a particular kind of material in their library. I can think of maybe a Spanish-speaking family in a small town that hasn't had a lot of Spanish-speaking families, or a Christian homeschooling family who wants more Christian fiction, say, in their libraries. How can they open that conversation? What are some of the options there?
So they should find out if their public library, most public libraries have a method to request materials. And then, again, every library has its own local policies and procedures. So how they deal with those requests for materials from the public that they are serving might vary from place to place. They might look at that request in light of the community they're serving and their collection guidelines and go, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We can get that book. They're weighing budget considerations and other things. They're looking at, is that material available? Maybe not right here in our library, but can we get it through interlibrary loan? So there's a lot of factors, but absolutely they should start by going to their library and go, hey, how can I request that you purchase some materials? There's no guarantee, because I can't speak for every library and what their policies and procedures say, but you should never hesitate to go to your library with either a request or a concern.
Getting back to book challenges, you kind of recounted the history. They've been there a long time. We saw this peak. What have you seen in the last just couple few years since it seemed like these challenges, very public challenges, were all over the news?
Yeah, I would say the statistics in terms of the numbers have dropped off. What that whole period did, it made it really, really hard for librarians in some places to do the work of selection because they were fearful and second-guessing. Some of what was happening over that really intense 2.5 year period included public attacks on the individuals who were working in libraries. And so it became really fraught for some people, understandably. And so we think about, I think, decisions that they might have made 5 years ago. Of course, I'm going to buy this book that's really well reviewed on this topic for my library. Maybe feels a little bit harder to do. So there's that sort of long-term effect in some places, which is, I'm going to flip that a minute and say, when you appreciate materials that your library offers, let them know.
Do you see, and it may not be possible to have data on this, do you suspect that there's some of that self-censorship going on? I'm going to avoid the risk of this challenge by not selecting this new book.
I can't speak definitively. I know a number of years ago there were studies on self-censorship before any of this happened. It's just an ongoing thing that I think librarians are always thinking about and aware of in the back of their mind as they're making selection decisions. But I think what I can tell you is I've heard librarians talk about that second-guessing piece, things that They just knew as a matter of course, because they'd done their research and a book really fit into their collection guidelines and was recommended. They're really agonizing more over some of those decisions in some places. Again, nothing is going to apply to everyone everywhere.
We're talking about book challenges, libraries, and more with Megan Schliessman with the UW-Madison Cooperative Children's Book Center. She's retiring next month after just over 3 decades there. I want to talk about the role of the Cooperative Children's Book Center. You mentioned you do more than book challenges. We'll get to that in a minute. But what kind of guidance, what kind of help do you offer libraries around the state when it comes to book challenges?
Sure. So we began this aspect of our work in 1978 in our role as a statewide resource center for children's and young adult literature because we have access to so much information about children's and young adult literature that's readily available. So a Wisconsin library that's facing a concern about a book can reach out to us, and we can really quickly and easily provide reviews and other assessment information about that title. That library already did that work when they selected the book, but they haven't kept it all. So we like to say, let us do that piece for you. And we're not taking a position, we're just providing that information for them so that the library staff, the person who reaches out to us, can really focus on the communication issues that are so critical at the time of a concern. A key part of that communication for a library is making sure everyone involved knows and understands the library's board-approved policies for how you navigate a concern. So that's part of that communication piece that we'll talk to them about, because it's so important that every concern in terms of what those policies and procedures say is handled the same way, that there's a uniformity to that, so that regardless of who is raising the concern, there's a fair and equitable approach to how it's responded to.
And do you have particular advice in that situation where we saw a few years ago somebody challenging a lot of books and maybe that heated library board meeting or other public venue, advice on how to lower the temperature and take things through that process that's already established?
Librarians already know what they have to focus on doing, which is take a step back when that concern comes in, look at your policies, procedures. Where are you in that process? What do you need to inform that concerned individual about? Maybe they've made a statement on social media or at a board meeting, but they haven't actually reached out and talked to anybody. And conversation is so important. And it's actually part of some libraries' policies and procedures, that informal conversation, to hear about that concern, to let them know why the book is part of the collection and what the next steps are if they feel strongly that book should not be in the collection. I will say one of the different elements that I forgot to mention earlier about what has changed is often in that really intense period we saw recently, the people who were raising them didn't have kids and young children anymore, or children under 18. They were community members often, but not necessarily people who were raising kids at that time.
Right, and we haven't used the word censorship yet, but there's talk about intellectual freedom and having people have access to books. Can you talk a little bit about that idea of intellectual freedom and access? That can be lost if it's taken off the shelves completely.
Sure. In libraries, we talk about intellectual freedom as the right to seek and receive information from all points of view. That's sort of this basic fundamental idea of intellectual freedom. I keep talking about fundamental elements of libraries, but they really all work together. Intellectual freedom and choice and the idea of serving everybody in your community, knowing that not every book is going to be a good fit for every child or every family, but you want to make sure every individual, every child, every family can come in and find books that they're going to enjoy. So again, it's sort of looking at your collection as a whole and making sure you're collecting a wide array of materials, thinking about that diversity in all its many forms.
Now, at the Cooperative Children's Book Center, this isn't the only issue you work on. What are some of the other services you're providing for libraries around the state?
So we're a statewide book examination center. We're part of the School of Education at UW-Madison, and we receive review copies from publishers of new books that come out every year. We serve librarians and educators across the state in addition to the campus community. So if they want to find out about or come in and see brand new books being published as they're making selection decisions, they can do that. Maybe a teacher is revamping the curriculum. So we also have a core collection of books that are older than 1 or 2 years, that we can help them identify books that they can consider for incorporating into the curriculum in some way. We do an annual recommended list called CCBC Choices as well. We do outreach with librarians and teachers around the state on all of this.
You work with a lot of books. I don't know if you have time to read them closely enough to have some recommendations for us today, but for kids and or grown-ups, do you have any books to share?
I do, and I wanted to start with one that I just read this weekend, but it ties right into what we've been talking about. It's a new anthology for young adults called Band Together, BANNED. It's edited by Ashley Hope Perez and Debbie Fong, and it's 14 authors of books that have been challenged in band in recent years, sharing their perspectives on this experience through essays, through poetry, through comics, and through some short stories. And they're talking in part about how it impacted them, but also why they write what they do for youth. Picture book that I loved I think it's the first one I got excited about early in the year, is called All by Myself, but Sometimes I Need a Little Help by Elizabeth Everett. It's a really cheerful picture book that celebrates a child's solo accomplishments while matter-of-factly stating there are still also things that they need help with. And I love that because it makes clear that needing help is perfectly okay. A great novel that would be a wonderful read aloud for maybe, first, second grade is called Bad Badger, a love story by Mary Rose Wood. And this is a badger who has spots instead of stripes, and he wonders if that means he's still a badger. And then a seagull starts hanging out on his porch, and then he wonders how to be a good friend.
Megan, we'll leave it there. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.
Megan Schlesman is the librarian and assistant director of UW-Madison's Cooperative Children's Book Center. She'll retire next month after 32 years.
Still ahead on Wisconsin Today, a new guidebook is a road trip through Wisconsin's beer, brats, and cheese scene.
I tried to just kind of pick and choose those that had some really fun local flavor or just a really great vibe or really interesting way that they were doing beer, brats, cheese.
We take a tour. That's next from WPR News.
It's Wisconsin Today. I'm Rob Farrett.
And I'm Kate Archer-Kent. In 2022, Wisconsin native Heather Kerrigan embarked on a 2,600-mile road trip through Wisconsin. Her mission, to taste test food and drink that our state has become famous for.
Over 4 weeks, Kerrigan stopped at hundreds of places to sample the best beer, brats, and cheese. I guess, Kate, somebody had to do this work. For some reason, they didn't call me.
Yeah, sorry about that, Rob. But the result is a roughly 200-page highlight reel featuring local breweries, restaurants, and cheese shops on and off the beaten path. The book is called Beer, Brats, and Cheese, a Wisconsin Road Trip, and Heather Kerrigan joins us now. Heather, welcome to Wisconsin Today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Take us back to the moment that you leave the driveway. What is going through your mind as you set out on this mission?
Excitement. I was super excited to see some of the parts of the state that I haven't really had too much of a chance to explore, but also a little bit nervous about what it was going to be like doing this. We did it for 4 weeks straight. So that meant visiting just 8, sometimes 10 places a day, which is a lot. So, just the knowledge that we were going to be leaving things on our plate, which is super un-Wisconsin and super un-Midwestern of me, and I don't love to do that. But yeah, finding a way to pace ourselves and having fun.
And you call this book a highlight reel. What can people expect in that format when they're paging through the book?
So I tried to make it, you can really follow the book from start to finish in one long road trip, or you can kind of part it together in kind of like 5 different regions of the state. So what I tried to do was start at point A, and end all the way at point Z, if you will, in that region, so that folks could kind of follow it from one place to another. Obviously, there's no way I could have hit every restaurant, butcher shop, creamery, brewery in the state over 4 weeks. So I tried to just kind of pick and choose those that had some really fun local flavor or just a really great vibe or really interesting way that they were doing beer, brats, cheese, and kind of went from there.
Yeah, so readers can Kerrigan this if they want to and do the 2,600-mile loop.
If they want to, yes.
So you write, Wisconsin's first commercial brewery opens in 1835 near Mineral Point, and that Milwaukee became the state's brewing capital. Can you talk about what was happening that really sets Milwaukee apart from the rest of the state for brewing?
Sure. So right around the time that Wisconsin became a state, lager was becoming more popular among especially the German immigrants that were coming into the state. And to be able to brew lager as opposed to an ale, you need a really dark, cool space for aging it. And Milwaukee is really great for that because not only do you have the lake, but you also have the nearby smaller lakes, the ponds, things like that, where you can create caves that can draw on the water that keeps them cool, but also the ice that they create in the winter. So that area also gives brewers really good access to fresh water for beer making. And then they have the lake, so they have transport routes for moving their product and also bringing in equipment. And it's a really nice fertile area of the state as well. So tons of farms nearby where they could grow barley, they could grow hops, they could grow those other ingredients that are really critical for making beer.
So Milwaukee was this epicenter of brewing for decades, but it really seems Kenosha and Racine have really come into their own. Can you talk about that region and what you found?
Yeah, they really have. And there's so much happening on that scene right now, even in the past decade. One of the places, actually, the place where I went to high school in Burlington, didn't have a brewery for 65 years until the Runaway set up shop. And that was followed by another brewery shortly thereafter. But now it's like, they're really trying to make Burlington, put it on the map again for craft beer lovers. And the wonderful thing about it is for a place like the Runaway, they're not only drawing on local ingredients for their beers, but they're putting it on their menu as well. So it makes it a really nice place to go and try like a brat. They get theirs from East Troy's Hometown Sausage or some local cheeses, things like that. But also nearby in East Troy, you have East Troy Brewery, and they're doing the kind of the same thing. So they're getting their cheese curds from Hill Valley. They're sourcing local ingredients on their menu in their beers. And then kind of looking even further into southeastern Wisconsin, you have Highfield Farm Creamery, which is one of the state's smallest milking parlors. And they have this really amazing buttery yellow cheese because they let their cows pasture graze. And so their diet just creates this milk that when the cheese is produced, it has that really interesting color. What I always like to tell people to do is that they can go to Greengrocer in Williams Bay, which has a great selection of Highfield Farms cheese, but also a ton of other local Wisconsin food and drinks. And especially if it's the summer, it is such a great place to just grab some snacks and take them over to the lake and just have yourself a little beach picnic.
I love it. When you walked into an establishment, did you reveal what you were doing, or were you kind of undercover about this?
I was completely undercover about it. I never told somebody that I was working on a book. It was really important to me that I got the experience that anybody else who's walking in the door would have. So I didn't want to give anything away to make somebody treat me any differently or serve me anything differently. And I think that was probably the hardest part of the trip, because everybody wants to make sure that the people who come into their establishments are having an amazing experience. And so when you sit down and you take, one sip of a beer, or you eat one cheese curd, or take one bite of a brat, it immediately invites questions about, why didn't you like it? Oh, can I get you something different? What could we have done? And you have to explain, oh, no. I have so many other places I want to check out today in this area. So I have to kind of pace myself.
Did you have a system for what to include and what to kind of leave behind for the book? You had to be pretty choosy.
I did. So especially when you're looking at beer, it can get very easy to just say, this place has ale, this place has lager, this place has stout, and over and over and over again. So I tried to really include those things that are a little bit more unique, or places where they're really drawing on Wisconsin ingredients. Especially, there's a lot of places that, for example, infuse their beer with, and their cheese too, for that matter, with cranberries. And so that was something that I really wanted to mention. Or are using Door County cherries in something that they're making. So I tried to look for those places and then really highlight that, so it didn't become kind of monotonous for a reader or even a traveler. You don't want to necessarily do the same thing over and over and over again for days in a row.
We are talking with Wisconsin native Heather Kerrigan about her new book. It's called Beer, Brats, and Cheese, A Wisconsin Road Trip. Okay, so Heather, the history of brats runs deep in Wisconsin. Can you tell us about Ralph and Alice Stayer? These are the creators of the famous Johnsonville brats and the Sheboygan Brat Oath.
Sure, I would love to. So brats over time, especially in Wisconsin on farms, they were, they're portable, they're cheap, and they're easy to eat while you're working. But they really kind of came into more of the mainstream of actually being produced at butcher shops when Ralph and Alice decided that they could make something that relied on premium cuts of meat rather than kind of the cheaper leftover cuts that most brats tended to be made with back in the 1930s, 1940s, that time. And so, obviously since then, Sheboygan's kind of exploded and become this brat capital of Wisconsin. And today you can, if you're visiting, I would definitely invite you to take the Brat Oath, which the Sheboygan tourism folks put out. And it just kind of, tells you a little bit about how you should or shouldn't be making your brat, which folks of Sheboygan can tell you. They have a very specific way to serve it.
We're going to move on to Brown County, which also has a rich brat beer and cheese history. What stands out to you in this part of the state?
Oh gosh, there are so many amazing things in Brown County. I would say that, it has such a rich history. You can, if you are visiting the area in the summer, Woodlawn Cemetery actually offers a beer baron walk that you can go on, where you can kind of get a little bit of flavor of the area's brewing history. And actually, as an added bonus for that one, you get a booklet with some BOGO beer coupons for a lot of the local places that are around Green Bay. And there's so many to choose from. Some of my favorite places to visit when we're in the area I love to go to Zambaldi because they're very family friendly. So they do like a lot of kid friendly events throughout the week. They have sometimes face painting, sometimes ice cream trucks, but they also have a spiced beer that they make with Door County cherries, which I just think is such a fantastic infusion. And then I think Copper State is a great place to stop, not just for their beer, but they also have a beer mac and cheese, which is, a fun way to kind of combine the two. It's like just a little gooey heaven in a bowl sort of a thing. And obviously, if you're over by Lambeau Field, you can't go wrong with Kroll's West and getting a brat there, which personally I think pairs well with the broccoli cheddar poppers, another way to get your brat in with your cheese.
You mentioned cheese. That's where we're headed next. You call Greene County the state's cheese-making hub. What did you find in this area?
So much cheese. This was a wonderful, wonderful part of the trip where it was just, cheese for days and days. Just as you're kind of driving around Greene County, you have the chance to try cheese from so many award-winning cheesemakers and so many master cheesemakers. Monroe is kind of, the place to be. If you want to have a little bit of cheese, you can, when you're driving in and out of it, you can grab a grilled cheese at Decatur Dairy. If you're brave, you can get some Limburger.
Hold the nose.
Alpendale, exactly. Alpendale Cheese Store has this huge selection of cheese from around the state and so many samples too. So it's a really good way to help you pick your favorite because, you can kind of try a little bit of everything. But if you're in the area, it's one of the really fun things you can do in the summer is you can hit up the National Historic Cheesemaking Center. And it's just a wonderful place to learn about the history of cheese in Greene County. And they have some lovely guides that will take you through the process. But if you happen to be there at the right time of year, they have an annual demonstration where retired and master cheesemakers get together and they produce a giant wheel of Swiss over the span of just a few hours using the same methods that they were using back in the 1800s.
Wow.
And it's a really cool thing to experience.
I bet that is so neat. So beyond the cheese and the brats and the beers every mile or few miles as you went, what will you hold with you about Wisconsin from this journey beyond the food?
The people. I grew up in Wisconsin, so I already knew that the state is just full of wonderful, kind people. But it was just so exciting to see the passion that they have for their craft, whether it's beer, whether it's brats, whether it's cheese. They're just pouring so much effort and love into what they're doing. And it really comes through in their product. You can't find anything better than what you'll have at any of the places that you'll find across Wisconsin.
Heather, before I let you go, would you mind reading a bit from the Sheboygan Brat Oath for us?
I would be glad to. I, Heather, do solemnly swear before all brat certified sausage makers, bakers, and backyard chefs that I vow to respect the brat ritual with all its rights and privileges endowed upon its practice, and I will hold steadfast to its meaning and tradition. With resolution, I proclaim the promise to always fry brats, to always serve them on a hard roll, and to always protect them from non-sanctioned preparation techniques. I hereby swear that I denounce pre-boiling, I denounce overdressing with pickled cabbage and other offensive forms of condimentation. I denounce the oblong bun, and I will deny all temptation to engage in interrelations between brat and cheese rituals. It is my duty and intent to become now and forever a pillar of strength in the foundation of the brat capital of the world, and with that duty and intent, I shall never, even in the shadow of the face of death, deny a brat eater a beer.
Oh my goodness. Do I say amen or so help me God? I don't know. That was amazing.
I think you probably should, especially if you're biting into a brat.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us and all the best to you.
Thank you so much.
That is Wisconsin author Heather Kerrigan. Her book is called Beer, Brats, and Cheese, a Wisconsin Road Trip. Have you ever completed a road trip where you sampled a particular food or drink, or maybe you had a mission to do something with a different theme? Tell us about what you tasted or saw, what you learned from this curated journey. Maybe you're planning a road trip right now. Tell us about what you have in the works. Email us at wisconsintoday@wpr.org. That's wisconsintoday@wpr.org.
Okay, Wausau, what's the thing with Red Lobster? Seriously.
Last week, the Wausau Daily Herald reported on how an airplane banner flew over the company headquarters for Red Lobster in Florida, and the banner read, "Wausau, Wisconsin loves Red Lobster, please, XO."
Apparently this Red Lobster Wausau, courtship fan fiction goes back several decades.
And that got us thinking, is there something your community has a curious fascination with? Whether it's a restaurant or a store or something else, tell us about it. Email wisconsintoday@wpr.org, or you can call or text us at 888-642-0232.
And hey, Wausau, you know what you want. You went for it. Respect.
Wisconsin Today producers include Colleen Leahy, Joe Tarr, and Mackenzie Crummy. Our technical directors are Sarah Hopeful and Tyler Ditter. Learn more about us at wpr.org/Wisconsin Today. I'm Kate Archer-Kent.
And I'm Rob Farrett. You're listening to WPR News.